let's just say he had an investor meeting 36 or 24 hours. It was just right after it hit. The power went out, everything went out. It was insanity in New York City. And he's like, I'm going to the investor meeting. I'm going to the investor meeting. I'm committed to the round. And he actually took a bus a day after the hurricane and went to Boston and pitched that investor and spent an hour at them. Welcome back this week. Messy middle. It's the messy middle. I mean, it's so messy that this is the third week in a row we do not have our super amazing French American co-host
Estonian,
Frank.
Vietnamese.
Oh yeah. What I mean,
Wannabe.
Estonian, Vietnamese. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
On his honeymoon this week, we will miss him. We miss him dearly. Honestly, I miss having his energy, even though he might come across as pessimistic sometimes, his optimism of ideas.
Absolutely. And I've heard like a lot of people who reached out who were like, is Frank coming back? It's like, of course he
Yeah.
is. And I actually mentioned to the episode, but that shows how much how much these people listen to our episodes.
Yeah, and they like Frank. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just to
Okay.
let everyone know. We are excited though to be here and have this conversation together with and he'll be back next week. We'll have a lot to talk about when he's back. So, episode, what is this? 26 now? Oh my God, we're 26
I think it's
weeks
26.
into
Yes.
26 weeks. It's April 30th. Tomorrow is May 1st. We've been doing the messy middle since November. So I think the conversation today is on, what is it on, Teddy?
Commitment.
Commitment. Exactly. So,
Yes.
which actually fits in really well with Frank because he just got married, and that is the biggest commitment you could make. And we discussed this really early on, I think, in our episodes of how co-founder dating is really going to drive you to a co-founder marriage and to have commitment. And now all of us are married, the three of us. None of us have kids yet. I know a couple of our listeners are like, hey, you got to get a guy on here who has kids. We had a few guests that have kids already, okay? So now we're going to talk about commitment from our point of view without kids, and really in the messy middle stage. So, Teddy, what do you think when you think of commitment? What's your kind of definition of commitment?
I don't know if I have specific definition. Let me think. When I say
Like
I commit to
feelings around it.
something, yeah, when I say I commit to something, it means that I'll do it no matter what. So commitment to me, it's like if we say we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this no matter what. That's like the basis of it. But
Give me
then,
an
of
example.
course, there are a lot of things that can get in between, and you gotta navigate through these commitments and find balance, and that's also part of dealing with people in general. I mean, marriage is commitment, right? You mentioned that Frank's commitment, recent commitment. That's a big one. But even in marriage, you have things that are just like popping up from time to time, and you gotta find a way to navigate through through those challenges. But the essential thing there is that you do this together no matter what, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no other way to explain it. I don't know. Is there any other like values or definition or things that come to your mind when you think of commitment?
I think there's different levels of commitment. I think when I think of what commitment is to me is what you defined as commitment. I think which is what most of our listeners who are founders, post-exit founders, define as commitment, which is you're going to show up. And if you don't show up, you know what the consequences are. I can say for the three of us on our podcast, if we don't show up for the businesses that we've run and the businesses that we worked on, things don't happen. So, and I wish Frank was here because this is a really strong point that we discuss all the time, which is like we commit to something and things move forward because of our involvement as the person pushing things forward. So, and I think you have varying levels of commitment. Um, and as a post-exit founder, you need to be careful of what you commit to. Um, and I think everybody's got a different style, but I've seen styles that work, which are basically is you commit to this, you're going to do it, and you're going to follow through with it. And if you can't, you communicate that. Um, but like, I don't know, it's hard because I'm assuming you've been in a situation where you've kind of like half committed to something and maybe don't feel that you want to do it further. Like, how do you get out of
Mm.
commitments? It's kind of a question that I have too.
Yeah, that's also interesting. Uh, I mean, it depends when you at the moment when you commit to something. What's your sort of expectation? As you said, there has to be some sort of rules how you can. What does it mean for you to honor that commitment? But also, what does it mean for you to, if I don't know, shit hits the fan, you gotta get out of the commitment because of whatever reasons. Uh, but it matters when you at the moment when you commit, what are the circumstances, what's going on in your mind, your heart. If you really want to pursue something and you commit to it, uh, that's usually longer term. It's a good thing. But yeah, I've been in situations where I'll just sort of commit to something just to test out if it's going to work, relationship, business, partnership. But then you kind of know because you can tell also the other side, or you either communicate or just it's a feeling. You know that this is an experiment, and then the expectations are lower. Uh, but it's been really challenging if you don't put these things in like writing or formally agree on what the commitment is. So I find that really like I think for me personally, a weakness in a way because I've like almost in all of these commitments that are that did not work in the past, there wasn't any clear agreement in place. So we sort of committed, let's try this out, but then eventually we sort of split and it did not work out.
And what's
Uh,
the time frame usually that takes? Is it like very quickly early on, or is it sometimes
mm,
like, oh my God, this has been 6 months or a year of my life, and I realize this other party's not committed, or I'm not committed?
yeah, I think it's very personal. I know people that can drag things forever and they'll just stay in this uh, spot to where they like experiment with things and they think they're making progress, but in fact, there's nothing really going on. You're just like catching up over Zoom every once in a while and talk about the project, but there's no project. Uh, I'm a type of person that typically would give couple chances to people. So like if there's one sort of red flag or something that shows that this person is not committed fully based on what we really discussed earlier, then I'll give them another chance and maybe another chance. So for me, it's maybe, I don't know, 4-ish months roughly, like 3 to 6 months, which is actually quite a,
That's pretty
uh,
generous.
it is because sometimes I'm like, what the fuck am I doing now? Because I've give this person my 3 6 months, whatever. Sometimes more, sometimes like more involvement. Sometimes not as much, but still, it takes up my brain power. I could use that time to focus on something else. But I think it's a key to figure out whether you want to commit longer term to a relationship. If you think in centuries, not in days, then that's nothing really. So if you work on something groundbreaking, again, now we're talking about projects or marriage, longer term commitments, then you got to be willing to put in 3 to 4 months, 6 months. It sounds generous, but I think it's a good enough time to figure things out, you know?
I think the other thing that's interesting is if I look back at, and I want to get into examples of commitment here, or showing how committed I was on something, and or areas that I wasn't. So I could totally say, you know, um, in this post-exit founder journey, I've committed to, even recently, I'm working on the consulting agreement, doing a great job there. They pay me already, thank God. And they're paying me again tomorrow. I'm like feeling really happy. So all of you
That's awesome.
post-exit found, yeah, all you post-exit founders out there that feel that you can't do some consulting because consulting is the hardest thing to find for a business founder, it's possible. After 15 years, I figured it out. Um, that check in next week. Hopefully, they don't fire me. But for the commitment, commitments. Oh, excuse me. I committed to that sneeze, clearly. For the commitments on my end, I remember, and I kind of vividly remember this. This is an example of a friend. He was raising money for a startup, and he, business co-founder, he had a technical co-founder. He was based in Boston. He was in New York, and probably in the middle of a whatever $1 million raise. Hurricane Sandy was coming to New York, and
Cool.
he was staying in New York at the time, but he had an investor meeting on Monday morning, or I can't even remember which day of the week Hurricane Sandy hit. But let's just say he had an investor meeting 36 or 24 hours. It was just right after it hit. The power went out, everything went out. It was insanity in New York City. And he's like, I'm going to the investor meeting. I'm going to the investor meeting. I'm committed to the round. And he actually took a bus a day after the hurricane, and went to Boston and pitched that investor and spent an hour at them. And I was like, that's a pretty big commitment for such an early stage relationship. And of course, we can talk about like really
That's
crazy. That's a
Yeah, that's
crazy one.
definitely crazy. That's what I call we commit no matter what. That's what it means to
Yeah,
commit no matter what.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah, and it can be as simple as showing up for a meeting, like this
yeah,
investor meeting. It doesn't mean that you're early stage and it's less valuable. It's just the type of person that you are. If you commit
yeah.
to this thing, then you most probably be longer term partner. But yeah, go ahead.
And then I think the example of like not committing so much is in my case, there's been a few times where there's an idea that I'm working on that I know it's not gonna work. Or like, and this is not an idea that I've worked on for 3 years or 5 years. It's an idea that I worked on for a few months, let's say 3 months, 6 months. Actually, an example is the company was called GGX. It was right after Gamma, and it was during my messy middle, my last one, not the current one. And GGX was set up very similar style to Gamma, but it was a neobank for gamers. And I remember flying out to LA, California, and I was interviewing co-founders, and there was a guy in London who I really wanted to co-found the business with. And I said, okay, let me fly to London, let me meet with you. I couldn't book the flight to London for whatever the reason was. I just didn't want to, and the flight wasn't expensive, $300 from New York. And I'm like, this is probably because I don't want to do this business. Like I was like a half commitment. Like I had the deck, I had half the team. I was already meeting investors, and it felt really bad. And you could see my output was good, but I wasn't closing any checks. Meaning, and I normally close checks. So for me, I was pretty lucky because the other people on the team kind of knew, and they're like, "Look, do you really want to do this, Gabriel?" Like, I didn't raise any money, so thank God. They're like, "Do you really
Easy
want to
way
do
out
this?"
for you.
It was an easy way out. And the guy in London kind of like also he was kind of a wuss. He was like, "Oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to leave my job. I don't want." And I'm like, "You spent 4 months with me talking about this idea, and you just so so." I think there's examples for us as post exit founders where we're upset at other people not committing, but we've also committed to things that we need to kind of like backpedal from. So I
Mm.
think you have to be honest. I think you have to be honest with yourself on commitments here, in this messy middle period where you can commit to some things, but if you're going to commit to those things, show up and do it because it'll probably make you feel better about yourself. Like I can argue right now that this podcast for last 26 episodes, it's been great. Like the first couple of episodes were fantastic. Then we had like kind of a period where I was like, okay, let's get some guests in. I don't know. And it's really nice having a weekly podcast that, the three of us can join and discuss things because it's something that we're committing to on our calendar. And then I was able to add the new
Mm.
Talia stuff for Florence, and now I've got the commitment of the consulting, and I'm like, okay, so that's three things that I'm working on that are not full-time things, right? Like this takes us an hour a week to do, or 2 hours, with the editing and getting the guests. But I'm still looking for that one big thing to commit to, and that was one of the topics we
Yeah.
want to talk about, which is committing to a lot of things versus committing to one thing, and when you should know to commit to a lot of things versus committing to one things.
Yeah, I think this podcast is a good example for how you can also structure your commitments, which in this case is pretty easy. You just put in on a calendar, you make sure it's like you show up. Basically, that's kind of the basic thing. But I've been into commitments
but consistency is key. Like that's
exactly
the thing that it's like, even if you like, you don't need that much prep time for it. You should at least show up, because that will get you through the messy middle. Showing up, being there to your commitments. Either it's, your wedding, your honeymoon, for your family, but like showing up will allow you to get out of the messy middle. But I interrupted you, Teddy.
Yeah, no, I have a couple of thoughts. One is that sometimes you just, or most of the post-exit founders that I've kind of talked with in the past and talking with now, they're either tired from their previous business, or they're just as confused as we are. They don't know what to do next and trying to figure things out. So they're kind of burnt out, and it's not easy to commit in this phase, because now you have also this baggage that you're bringing from the past, whether that's expectations around your team or expectations about how your commitment partner should look like and behave on the other side, or like how the way you're used to executing on ideas may be different from the person that you're working with or experimenting with. So it's really hard to commit, and you got to figure out a sort of framework how you can sort of push yourself to be committed, because then it's easy to get out of that phase of consistency, right? One day you just don't want to wake up and don't want to get out of bed, and you're like, yeah, I'm not gonna do it. And if you feel that little little energy from the other side, that the other person is not as committed, then it's easy to just like go with the flow, and then both of you will just
you bail.
Yes, exactly.
I will say, so last month I was in New York alone. This month I'm in New York with Nastia, right? Because we're testing out New York to commit to where to live to. New York, San Francisco.
It's a big commitment.
It is a big commitment. And she likes New York a lot better than San Francisco. Let's be fully upfront about that. I know Ellie likes New York a lot better than San Francisco, although she could do LA maybe. So my point really was, I would get up in the mornings last month when I was in New York, and I could maybe sleep in until 9:30, whereas in Florida, I get up 7:30, 7:45, because Nastia is there sometimes earlier, because I'm like, I want to show my wife that I'm committed to figuring things out. But the month that I was here, as I was saying, I get up 9:30. I could push it to 10, but thank God I had the podcast. And I'm like, that would give me some structure to the week, and I could structure things around that. And now I'm back in the city this month. I've got the podcast. I've got other things. I'm meeting people, and there's a commitment to get up in the morning to do something. And I think no matter if you have $100 million, $10 million, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're in this post-exit founder kind of scenario, you got to find something to get up in the morning for. Because if not, you will be depressed. You will fall into video games. You will, decide to travel again to some random location because it'll give you inspiration.
Yeah, self-soothing is easy when you're in that spot.
Yeah. So don't commit to that. Commit to getting some things done. And of course, we're talking 6 months into this messy middle journey for me. So in the beginning, it was a little bit harder to commit, but now I feel in this position, I'm halfway through, I'm ready to commit to more things. But do you think,
one thing I want to say, it becomes easier when you have some progress also. Like even with the podcast, if we have like increased number of views, although that's not like something that you would intentionally chase. In our case, we're doing it for fun mostly, but once you see that there's a lot of use, or someone like you meet a random person in the same group and they told you that, hey, I watch your podcast and this was good, this was bad, and suddenly you have the like a reason to commit more. It becomes easier. So like when you're thinking about doing something, try to put that as your milestone. Try to get to at least something that will give you credibility or boost of energy, so you can commit more to that thing. That's really important.
Oh yeah.
Or at least for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the kind of the point that we're totally missing out of all of this that we haven't discussed yet is make sure you're committing to something. And this, I kind of reference this to the GGX stuff, but make sure to commit to something that you actually want to do. And that's actually going to get you to the next stage of where you are in your founder journey. So, my example is before I worked with Lars Rasmussen, the creator of Google Maps at Weave, raised all the money for him. I raised, his full entire round, and he created a product that 1 billion people use, Google Maps. And before I met him, my dream was to work with somebody that created a product that has 1 billion daily active users, which is Google Maps, right? Yeah. So I ended up working with him, and it was kind of kismet how it happened. Alchemist, the universe will conspire in your favor. But then the same thing with Gamma. My dream after with Weave was I want to have my own startup. I want to raise 3 million, whatever, 5 million. I want to build it. I want to product market fit and sell it, and did that. And then and I committed to doing that. That was my goal, and that was the next step. And then after Gamma, I had the messy middle, couldn't figure it out. And then I realized, okay, I want to take a company public. I want to know what it's like to raise a ton of money in public markets. And so I committed to that, and I did that. I'm not there yet in this messy middle. I can't decide what I want to commit to, but what I want to tell everybody, and what Teddy and I are really saying, is you got to commit to some things, because if you don't commit to anything, that's a commitment to nothing.
Yep. What do you think in terms of committing to maybe like a larger type of, let's say, goal that will give you the flexibility to do different things under that umbrella, versus committing to something very precise and narrow that will actually limit your...
Give me an example from your like, point of view.
You can say, like in my case, I keep saying I love longevity and I'm going to commit to longevity the next 10 years or whatever, but that's such a broad topic that it can mean anything, like software, learning, education, whatever. I can go to conferences. It's a lot of things under that umbrella of longevity.
Yeah.
Versus I'm gonna commit to making like a bottle or whatever project, very specific project.
I think it depends on the person, and I think it depends on the funnel of what you can get by saying, okay, I'm going to commit to doing longevity. If you have a funnel where you can say, okay, I'm going to go to conferences. I am going to go to longevity happy hours. I'm going to meet longevity founders. Here's the ideas. That's how it kind of starts, and then it goes through. I think it's rare, at least for me, it's been rare to commit to, I'm going to do a water bottle project. And the irony is I actually was thinking about doing like, like the Soviet style. Do you remember the Soviet style, like aluminum cups or like metal cups that they had? They would give out Soviet style. It's not Soviet, it was during Soviet times, but I had them in Moscow. Nastya and I went to a restaurant where it's all Soviet themed, just so you could feel what it's like. But it was reusable cups, and I was like, let me do a business around that. That'd be amazing. This was years before the Stanley Cup became a big thing this year, and I decided not to do that because it didn't fit in sort of the commitments that I wanted to commit to. But I think it depends. What I could say is I've never had an experience where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go do a SPAC, and that's what it ended up being. It was always, I'm gonna do this big thing. So like, I want to raise whatever. I want to do $1 billion deal. That's what it was. I want to do $1 billion deal. Let me figure out how I figure out the plan to get to doing $1 billion deal.
Yeah. That's definitely an approach. You focus, you commit to one larger goal, but then there are different paths. Exactly how you can get there. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we like kind of beat the commitment topic to death here. But we are committed to our audience to get you through this messy middle together. And we'll be excited to have Frank back next week. Um, who's got the quote for this week, you or me?
Let me Google it. Quotes on commitment. Unless commitment is made, there are only promises and hopes, but no plans. There you go.
I like that one. I like that one. Well, until next time, everybody. We'll
Bye.
see you next week. Stay committed.